You've spent the last hour painting a mental picture with your friends, freely exploring a mystical forest and casually bantering with the local tavern keeper. The story flows wherever your collective imagination takes it. But then, you kick open the heavy iron doors of a dungeon, and that free-form narrative slams into a brick wall. Waiting in the dark is a beholder, a floating sphere of flesh lined with magical, writhing eye stalks. The dungeon master looks at the group and utters the four most tension-inducing words in tabletop gaming: roll for initiative. Dungeons & Dragons is famous for being a game where you can attempt literally anything. So how do you take that boundless, chaotic creativity and suddenly cram it into a fair, organized system where life and death are mathematically measured? The answer starts by manipulating time. The game breaks the chaos of a melee down into a strict cycle of rounds. In the reality of the game world, a single round represents just 6 seconds of frantic, overlapping action. To govern those 6 seconds, the game relies on a core design philosophy. Specific rules beat general rules. For instance, the general rule states that swinging a melee weapon relies on your character's strength. But if your character has a specific magical class feature that lets them use charisma instead, that specific exception overrides the baseline rule. These parameters don't exist to stifle your imagination. They act as the underlying physics engine of the fantasy universe, giving your wildest creative ideas a sturdy mechanical framework so they can actually be played as a game. Before the first sword is even swung, the dungeon master runs through a quick mental checklist. They determine if either side managed to launch an ambush, triggering the surprise mechanic, and then they lock in where every hero and monster is physically standing in the room. This diagram shows exactly how the game defines physical space and scale. Every creature occupies a footprint on a grid, scaling from a tiny sprite in a single square to a gargantuan sea serpent commanding a massive cluster of hexes. To figure out who moves first within that grid, everyone makes a dexterity check called initiative. This die roll locks in the absolute chronological order of everyone's turns for the entire battle. When your turn finally arrives, you have a budget of resources to spend. The first is movement. You can walk, swim, or climb up to your base speed, and you can break that movement up, stepping from cover, doing something else, and retreating. That something else is the second key resource, your action. You could dash for extra movement, attempt to hide in the shadows, or take a defensive dodge stance. But the most common choice by far is taking the attack action. Knowing exactly how to weave your movement speed together with your action inside that tight 6-second window is the absolute bedrock of all tabletop strategy. Launching an attack starts with declaring your target. Position matters here. If you shoot a longbow while a hostile creature stands within 5 feet of you, you suffer a mathematical penalty known as disadvantage. This animation illustrates the core mathematical engine used to resolve attacks. You roll a 20-sided die, the iconic D20, and add your character's modifiers. To score a hit, your final total must meet or exceed the target's armor class. Once you breach that armor, you roll a different set of dice to calculate damage. That numerical value is subtracted directly from the monster's hit points. Combat isn't totally passive while you wait for your next turn. The game grants you a reaction, a special split-second action you can take on someone else's turn. If a terrified goblin tries to sprint away from you without defending itself, you can spend your reaction to take a free opportunity attack against them as they run. Sometimes you don't want to deal damage at all. If you want to wrestle a monster to the ground or shove them off a cliff, you bypass armor class entirely. Instead, you make an opposed roll, pitting your athletic skill directly against the enemy's own stats to see who overpowers who. Every tactical decision you make ultimately funnels down into the roll of that 20-sided die. It takes a cold, logical strategy and instantly injects it with a spike of high-stakes risk and reward. While a player only has to worry about the math and positioning of their single hero, the Dungeon Master is juggling an entirely different set of responsibilities. They have to manage the movement, attacks, and logic of every single monster on the field simultaneously. The table operates on an asymmetrical dynamic. The Dungeon Master sits behind a screen, hiding their notes and dice rolls, while actively managing the physical battlefield and orchestrating the opposition. To keep combat feeling fresh and challenging, the Dungeon Master can implement specific optional rules. One popular choice is flanking, which rewards players with a mathematical advantage on their attacks if they manage to strategically position themselves on opposite sides of a single enemy. If the party is facing down a massive horde of easily defeatable minions, the DM might introduce the cleaving rule. This allows a player who kills a monster with a heavy blow to carry any leftover damage directly into the next enemy standing beside it, drastically speeding up the fight. Monsters aren't mindless video game code. Using the morale rule, a DM can decide that a group of bandits will naturally panic and scatter if they lose half their total health or watch their leader drop, ending the encounter before every last enemy is wiped out. The Dungeon Master doesn't utilize these modular rules to cheat or punish the players. They deploy them to curate the exact right level of difficulty and maintain the illusion of a living, breathing world. When a player truly internalizes the rhythm of movement, actions, and the underlying math of the 20-sided die, the rigid structure of the game begins to fade into the background. The mechanics become second nature, leaving behind a fluid, cinematic experience. All of that structure exists purely to build the foundation for the moments that actually matter, like when the entire room holds their breath watching a die bounce across the table, praying it lands on a perfect critical hit. By wrapping wild fantasy concepts in strict mathematical parameters, the game ensures that your actions have real consequences. The threat of failure is what makes the illusion work. Because the rules enforce a fair, measurable degree of risk, finally reducing a dragon's hit points to 0 doesn't feel like a story handed to you. It feels like a victory you actually